Welcome to the Sonoma County Winegrape Commission's Winegrape Chronicles. In this monthly series, we'll follow several Sonoma County growers and winemakers through a typical winemaking season, giving you a glimpse into the process behind making some of the world's finest wines.
Good morning, my name is Ondine Chattan. I'm winemaker for XYZ Wines, and I'm standing here in the middle of the Dry Creek Valley with one of my grape growers, Andrew Forchini. XYZ is a winery that focuses on vine age and specifically on Zinfandel. So I'm looking at 3 different ages of vines: 10-year-old vines, 50-year-old vines, and 100-year-old vines. And Andrew's the grower of the 100-year-old vines.
We're in the 3rd week of May here, and as you see, we got a nice, beautiful, lush vine. These vines have really grown well since April. So now it's time to sucker, and Ondine and I are going to look at this vine, and I'm going to show you start to finish contrast between a unsuckered vine and the finished product. We call this the trunk. This is a big old vine, and here's its trunk. And from the trunk, we get up in here, we call this the arm. That's the arm. And then from the arm, we have the spur, my finger. And off the spur, we have 2 shoots with the clusters. And that's what we want to leave. And everything else, we take off. That's the suckers.
Because we're looking for balance on the vine to get fruit that's not too heavy for the vine to support, but fruit that's also not so lean that the vine doesn't actually have a healthy crop.
That's right. So here we go. So I'm taking off all this stuff. You don't have to be soft about it. These vines are very hardy. You're not going to hurt them.
Some of them are tough.
And you just rip all this stuff off. And what's left on the vine is still going to give us anywhere from 2 to 3.5 tons an acre, which is a good target yield for high quality Zinfandel. And that's what we want. If I try to push the envelope 5, 6, 7 tons the acre, these vines will never ripen that crop. These vines will never ripen all this. We have to take this off. And so by taking that off, you can see the difference, how we've opened up the head of this vine. We could let some sunlight get in there. The wind has a chance to get in there. The wind's an important ally. You see how it's windy right now? I really believe the wind is a good ally in preventing mildew at this stage in May. I think the key to old vine head prune dry farm Zinfandel here in Hillsburg, Sonoma County is the overall quality, the health of the vineyard, from the quality of the health of the vine to the soil fertility. And it's easy for us to lose production, and here's a perfect case. We had a missing vine for whatever reasons. Most likely it was hit by a tractor, or from some reason this vine just never did well from the get-go. So we decided to redevelop. We got an excavator, dug a big hole, took that dirt out, and replanted with fresh dirt that I quarried from some other location on our ranch. So now we got a nice growing root stock. This is the root stock, the root system of the vine. This does not produce fruit. This is just the root. And so what we're going to do now actually is I'm going to uncover this mound of dirt and show you the trunk of this root stock. And this is something me and our vineyard crews are going to be doing here this week. And you can come in by hand, but the best thing to do is to use a shovel. And now whammo, there's the trunk of the vine. In the fall, come September, we're going to bud. And what we do is we harvest the bud off this vine right here, and we insert it right into the trunk of this root stock. And then you cut the head, and then this bud's going to produce a shoot. It's going to look similar to that, and that shoot is going to grow into a vine like this. And then we have our brand new vine in an old 100-year-old vineyard. Not all these vines are going to live forever and ever. At some point, you have to start replacing the missing weak vines in order to achieve a nice healthy stand of vines like this.
So besides amazing quality Zinfandel, the Dry Creek Valley also produces fabulous Cabernet. And here on the Forchini Ranch, there's some great Cabernet vines. And it's a perfect example to see the different stages of bloom and flowering and set that occur on the grapevine. Right here, as you'll recall from the last podcast, are some very tight little grape buds. Right next to them are some flowers, and then we've got a little bit of set on the vine as well. And Andrew, you can tell us a little bit about this and how quickly it'll happen.
Happens really fast. You come here 8-10 days from now, and these flowers will be gone, and then you end up with a cluster that has set. That's the term used post-pollination. And from set, the individual berries on this cluster is what we're concerned about. And it's what we farm and what the winery makes the wine out of. Okay. So here you got a Cabernet vine that is right in bloom, almost post-bloom. And then you mosey on down over here, and now you end up with the finished product. Here's a typical Cabernet cluster, elongated, spatial, loose cluster, meaning not a lot of berries, high density like you have with the Zinfandel, Chardonnay, Pinot. Characteristic of a Cabernet, even a Merlot. Cabernet does really well, and we call these thriftier soils, kind of on the hillside. The Cab helps us out because it's later ripening than Zinfandel, and so we like to harvest in succession. So we could go from our Pinots or Chardonnays, come up here, do our Zins. By the time we're done with our Zins, our Cabs are ready. And then hopefully by second week of October, we're done picking.
Welcome to Geyser Peak Winery. Geyser Peak Winery is the home of XY Zin as well. XY Zin is a very small independent project that uses tank space here at Geyser Peak Winery. And we're in the blending room. About 150 years ago, a lot of Italian and Portuguese immigrants came to California and brought a lot of cuttings from their home countries. Zinfandel also made it over here at that time. It's originally from Croatia. However, it has come to be known as California's spiritual grape. It really found its spiritual home here in Sonoma County, particularly in Dry Creek Valley. But one of the great things is that there's still quite a bit of old vine Zin hanging around. Old vine doesn't necessarily mean better, but it does mean different. And again, on the line of being intuitive, pretty much what you'd expect with young vines when they're only 10 years of age or so. They're very abundant producers, as we saw in the vineyard. They tend to put out a bigger crop, but they're also a product of their environment. So you can't remove them from the context where they've got all the benefits of modern trellis training systems, of irrigation, of fertilizer, of new clones and rootstocks. And so not only do they put out a more abundant crop, but also the fruit tends to be a little bit larger in size. Right. The canopies take a little bit more work to manage because they're fairly vigorous. And so you get a wine that communicates that style. It's a very exuberant, upfront, very juicy wine. And then we'll see a progression to more complexity and even more intensity with the very old vines. So with the 10-year-old, as I was saying, it's all about youth. It's about vibrance and intensity. And younger vines, what I'm seeing is a lot of cherry fruit, very accessible, strawberry, bright cherry, vibrant acidity, not a wine that you need to put away for a long time in order to enjoy, something just upfront and enjoyable. So with 50, what's very interesting is, I talked about context on the 10-year-old. If you look back 50 years old, and you think about the people and the time that these vines were planted, it was sort of the crossroads of tradition and modern farming. And so what was happening then, a lot of people were still head training, like we saw in your vineyard. Some people were starting to use trellis training systems as well. These happen to be head trained. But what's great with these very old vines is how deep those roots go. And again, you mentioned that in the vineyard. But that deep rooting structure finds its own soil moisture. We don't have to worry about a lot of fertilization. The vines have found their own balance. But they're also slowing down a little bit, and they're concentrating their fruit a lot more. Well, now we'll move on to the 100-year-old vines. The very old vines show much more intensity of fruit and character. And they start with this wonderful depth of color. And that comes from the much smaller berries. What else is great in the very old vines is they're completely unirrigated, don't require fertilizer, so they struggle a bit, but they find their own balance. You start to get much more of a sense of character where the fruit is grown, get a little taste of the eastern Alexander Valley, but also there's tannin, there's structure. This is a wine that can stand up to a little bit of age, whereas I was saying with the 10, it's very young and youthful and should be enjoyed in its youth. The 100, I wouldn't mind if someone held on to it for 3 to 5 years. It'll gain a little bit of complexity, a little bit more earthiness. And it's definitely wine for a somewhat more special occasion because it's a wine to contemplate. And while I don't think you have to get super serious about it, there are all those layers to it. And the more you swirl it, and the more you smell it, the more you'll get out of it. Let's have a toast to beautiful fruit.
And good relations.
All right.
Thank you.